Arguably the most important position in fantasy football. Always goes overlooked. Nobody ever talks about it. But we've already gone through and looked at the win rates and have determined, based on the past 3 years, if you hit on your tight end pick, whether that's taking someone late last year like Rob Gronkowski, like Dalton Schultz, whether that's taking someone at the middle point of your draft in a Mark Andrews and having that elite level breakout, that is actually what's going to make the difference in your fantasy football draft. That's what's going to make the difference in your fantasy football league this year. So I'm going to be happy to go through and look at my 2022 tight end rankings as well as tiers. But before we get into it, please go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment if you see a ranking that you think looks off. And let's just start talking about Travis Kelce. With Travis Kelce, this is a tight end that has been on average the tight end one over the past 3 years. With Travis Kelce, if we go back and look at his 2020 season, dear God, this is the true upside that you may have from one of these tight ends. And with Kelce in this season, he had a win rate that was close to what you've seen from peak Alvin Kamara, a win rate that is almost impossible to find in fantasy football, especially from a player that's going at the very top end of your fantasy drafts. But this is because hell, he accounted for almost 25% of the team's target share in Kansas City. He accounted for almost 10 targets a game, almost 100 receiving yards a game as a tight end. That type of production is unheard of. And I know I'm going to sound like a crazy person right now. I get it. I understand it. Despite Kelce putting up, if not the best tight end season of all time, one of the best tight end seasons of all time in 2020, it could have been better. He had a touchdown rate only at 7.6%. If Travis Kelce managed to, in the league's best offense, or at least one of the league's best offenses, push that touchdown rate up closer to about 10%, dear God, Kelce could be the player that you need in your fantasy football draft this year. Now, I have to admit, if we head over to our 2022 fantasy football draft guide, where we have all the pros, all the cons on drafting any player you can think about, of course, our 2022 draft guide is now live. Make sure you go check it out over there on flockfantasy.com. If you use code FLOCK with any purchase on flockfantasy.com, in the month of July, you will get an exclusive discount at checkout. So please make sure you take advantage of that. But here, if we go ahead and if we pull up Travis Kelce's draft profile, you're looking at someone that does have a red flag. He is going to be 33 years old this upcoming season. If we go through and look at the next oldest player being drafted in fantasy football drafts right now, that is not a quarterback. Of course, quarterback, you're going to have guys like Brady. You're going to have old players at quarterback. But the next non-quarterback that is going to be 33 years old that's going in fantasy drafts is Marvin Jones in round 14. That is a massive red flag. I want to admit that. There's also a red flag that you see the yards per route run from Travis Kelce fall from 2.7 to only 2 this past season, maybe showing some signs of slowing down, which you would expect at this age. There are those red flags. But we saw that truly elite level ceiling in 2020. And also, you have not only Tyreek Hill going to Miami, you have Byron Pringle going to Chicago. You have Demarcus Robinson going to Las Vegas. You have Darrell Williams leaving, who had a ton of targets. You're opening up 317 targets, over 2,500 receiving yards, and 19 receiving touchdowns in this offense with those players leaving. Hell, while you are bringing in Juju, Sky Moore, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, it's not a guarantee that they combine for 2,500 receiving yards. Maybe, just maybe, Kelce actually sees an expanded role this upcoming season. But now let's stay in that same tier. Let's go over to someone that will see some regression. Let's look at Mark Andrews. Now with Mark Andrews, he's always been an elite level tight end if you're looking at the efficiency. In 2019, 3 yards per route run. In 2020, 2.1 yards per route run. This past season, hell, there wasn't much of a difference. 2.3 yards per route run. The efficiency was almost identical. And if you're looking at the target share in Baltimore, there wasn't that big of a jump either. Yeah, he goes from seeing about 24% of this team's target share on a per game basis to 25%. Big freaking deal. But the production was off the charts. The production had him going from 50 receiving yards a game to 80. The production saw a jump from 6 targets a game to 9. Now, why did this happen? It was because the Baltimore Ravens were so skewed to be an outlier offense in 2019, in 2020, that they simply had no passing volume at all. Thomas, please go ahead and throw up the amount of pass attempts that this team had, just say, in 2020 compared to these other options. You have the Baltimore Ravens at 406 pass attempts. The second lowest team in the NFL, 440. The next lowest team, the Tennessee Titans, 485. The Jets, 499. The Browns, 501. The fifth lowest passing volume offense in the NFL still had almost 100 pass attempts more this past season than the Baltimore Ravens. Now, of course, we see an outlier year in 2021. You have J.K. Dobbins going down. You have Gus Edwards going down. You have multiple defensive key injuries. You have Lamar Jackson going down, which skews this overall offense from going from 406 passing attempts up to 611, an extra 200 passing attempts in Baltimore. Now, I don't necessarily think the Baltimore Ravens are only going to throw the ball 400 times this year, but I can tell you they're not getting back to 600. I think you actually see the Baltimore Ravens find a happy medium between these two extremes for their respective offenses, but this is leading a lot of people to be off of Mark Andrews just based off the fact that this passing volume may not necessarily look like it's going to be reliable going forward. Now, my argument for this would be, hell, if we go out and look at the quarterback play that Mark Andrews dealt with this past season, Mark Andrews had the least efficient quarterback play he's ever seen. You have 5.1 adjusted yards per pass attempt from Tyler Huntley. 5.1. That's laughably bad. That's worse than Sam Darnold last year, where Lamar Jackson, while he's not Patrick Mahomes, still has averaged 7.7 adjusted yards per pass attempt. This offense should score more points. This offense should be significantly more efficient overall. You have Hollywood Brown leaving and taking 25% of this team's target share with them. I don't think Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay are going to soak all that up. So I think you may actually see Mark Andrews command a higher percentage of this team's offense, getting to 26, 27% of his team's target share, which of course is absurd for a tight end. But not only seeing an expanded target share, also being more efficient on a per target basis with Lamar coming back in and reestablishing the run in this offense compared to Tyler Huntley. So even if you have the overall offensive pie shrinking in the passing department for Baltimore, I still think Andrews can be that elite level option. I still think I'm going to have him in tier 1 because, hell, he's stepping into his prime. He was the tight end 1 overall last year, and I think the efficiency will actually be higher this season. Now, let's drop it down a tier. Let's go over to Kyle Pitts. And of course, you'll find all this information in that draft guide, as we already mentioned, on flockfantasy.com. But one of my favorite things that we have in there in the Kyle Pitts chapter on the draft guide is we went out to RotoViz and we checked out the players that were 21 years old, their rookie seasons since the year 2000. And we filtered out for options that had 63 or more receiving yards per game and 6 or more targets a game. Keep in mind, 21-year-old rookies. Kyle Pitts was the best tight end prospect of all time. Then he was the best rookie tight end of all time. It's not like we can compare Kyle Pitts to any other tight end in NFL history. It's not fair. You can't find historical comparisons, but you can at wide receiver. And with that criteria, the only other players to have as impressive of a 21-year-old rookie season as Kyle Pitts, Mike Evans, Juju Smith-Schuster, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson. Now, half these players were selected in either the first or second round the year after their rookie season. And of course, if you're getting, say, 16 points per game from your wide receiver that you select in round 2, yeah, that's great. You're not upset that you made that selection, but it's not going to be a league-winning pick. Now, if you get 16 points per game from a tight end that you select in round 2, dear freaking God, you are just standing out from the crowd to an extreme measure. But Pitts is going round 3. In some casual drafts, Kyle Pitts is slipping to the 4th round. Now, on Underdog Fantasy, you're never going to see Kyle Pitts fall past the 3rd round. I've gotten him in the 4th round, maybe in 1 out of my 300 drafts, because the smartest drafters are drafting on Underdog Fantasy. And if you have not signed up for Underdog yet, fix your life. Go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK when you sign up, and you'll get our 2022 Fantasy Football Draft Guide for free. You will get our 2022 rankings, our 2022 Dynasty rankings, our Dynasty rookie rankings. Make sure you go take advantage of that. Most importantly, you can have fun with us in drafts in the live stream. You can find that link down there in the description. Promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. But with Kyle Pitts, yes, the offense is going to be worse. Yes, they draft Drake London. But also, if you go check out our draft guide here, you're going to see that, yeah, they bring in Drake London, but they are missing so many key players from this offense last season. Russell Gage is gone. Mike Davis, Hayden Hurst, Wayne Gallman, Tajay Sharp, Calvin Ridley, all out the door. And they're taking 272 targets. They're taking 166 carries with them. So Drake London can come in. Drake London could be an effective rookie wide receiver, possibly better than Russell Gage was last year. But Kyle Pitts still has room to take a step forward. So yeah, I was calling Kyle Pitts when he was being drafted as a 4th round rookie tight end last year, the worst pick in fantasy. Now I am ecstatic. I am jumping up and down to take him in the 2nd round because he wasn't just the best rookie tight end prospect of all time. He came in, he proved it to us. He may be, I don't want to go that far, but he's on the right track to be a Hall of Fame level tight end. Now, let's drop it down a tier. We are going to have Kyle Pitts by himself. Let's go over and let's look at Darren Waller right now, ranking him as tight end 4. That's been his average finish over the past 3 years. And with Darren Waller, if anything, he's had some unlucky factors affecting his play over the past 3 years. He's had an average touchdown rate of 3.6%. Look at Darren Waller. Look at the monster that he is. You would just naturally assume that Darren Waller is a touchdown scoring machine. You would assume that Darren Waller has a touchdown rate above league average. But going back to what we were saying with Kyle Pitts, touchdown rate's the most volatile statistic in fantasy football. Just because Darren Waller only scored a touchdown on 2.11% of his team's targets last year, it doesn't mean it's going to happen again this upcoming season. It's probably going to be a lot higher than that for Darren Waller. Now, with Waller, he's averaged almost 24% of his team's target share over the past 3 seasons. And of course, the red flag, the reason why Waller's going cheaper in drafts this year than he did last year, cheaper than he was the year before that, is Davante Adams is coming over. And with Davante Adams coming over, you are looking at a player that will 100% lead this team in targets. Davante Adams averaged almost a 30% team target share in Green Bay. Now, that's not going to happen because Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow are very capable players. But I wouldn't be surprised if Davante Adams, he himself gets to 25% of this team's target share. Darren Waller, when he's not competing with Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs for targets, and instead he has to go up against Davante Adams and he has to go up against Hunter Renfrow, I would imagine his target share actually comes down to a little bit closer to, say, 20% of this offense, but it's going to be a very concentrated target tree. Really, the only players you should expect to get work in this offense are going to be Davante Adams, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, and Josh Jacobs. If you look at the depth chart beyond those players at the wide receiver position in particular, it's laughable. I want to say this offense is going to be very similar to the Cincinnati Bengals, where they really don't use a 4th wide receiver. And in the case of Las Vegas, because they use Darren Waller essentially as a wide receiver regardless, I would say that maybe, just maybe, yeah, they have a 3rd receiver out there on the field sometimes, but it's more so going to be Darren Waller operating as that 2nd pass catching option, Hunter Renfrow being the 3rd guy here. And I do think there is upside in this overall offense because Derek Carr last season, when he spent half the year with Bryan Edwards as an every down player, he was top 5 in the NFL in passing yards. He was only behind Tom Brady, Justin Herbert, Matthew Stafford, and Patrick Mahomes. So Derek Carr, I'm fine drafting him where he goes. On Underdog Fantasy, goes near the end of the 4th round. Sometimes you can get him falling to the 5th, which if that happens, it's an auto pick. But at the end of the 4th, I'm going to be slightly overweight on Darren Waller, just specifically on Underdog. I really like having the elite level tight end for that 3-week stretch at the very end of the season, but that's besides the point. Even in a regular fantasy football draft, I'd be comfortable taking Darren Waller here. Now, our next tight end in this tier is going to be George Kittle, someone that I believe to be one of the most talented players in the NFL. George Kittle, over the past 3 years, has averaged over 3 yards per route run. Do you have any idea how tough that is? Now, let me search Cooper Kupp up in our draft guide so I can tell you how many yards per route run Cooper Kupp had last year. Keep in mind, this was just a 1-year thing for Cooper Kupp. You actually had George Kittle averaging over 3 yards per route run over the past 3 seasons. Here, if we're looking at Cooper Kupp, last year, he got to 3.4, which of course is the most elite receiver in the NFL, the elite of the elite. And Kittle's doing that at the tight end position. George Kittle has been a freaking monster. I truly do want to stand by the fact that I think he is one of the most talented players in the NFL and has an argument to be made based on how he affects the run blocking efficiency in San Francisco as well, that he's the most complete and the most talented tight end in the NFL. Now, with that being said, I love the talent of George Kittle. With that being said, he's averaged the tight end 3 finish on a points per game basis over the past 3 years. I can't rank him as the tight end 3 because while Lance is one of my favorite guys in fantasy football, y'all know this, I've loved Lance for years now, and we've seen him play, 2 NFL games? But Lance is going to be elite in fantasy because he is going to be one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the NFL. Very similar to Lamar Jackson, very similar to Jalen Hurts. He may not necessarily be able to support a ton of passing options. I'm not saying that he's going to ever turn into Patrick Mahomes, be able to throw for 300 passing yards a game. Now, that is going to handicap George Kittle. And Mark Andrews is able to overcome the lack of passing volume in Baltimore because he's not playing in an offense with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. So I am expecting a slightly worse season overall for George Kittle. I love the guy, but I have to have him down here at tight end 5. Now let's drop it down another tier. Let's go over and look at probably one of the biggest risers in drafts this offseason. Let's look at Dalton Schultz. With Dalton Schultz, this was the tight end 5 last season on a points per game basis. We're ranking him behind that, and he has a better situation coming into this upcoming season. With the Dallas Cowboys, they were first in the NFL last year in points scored. This should be predictable going forward because Dallas at the same time has been consistently top 5 in their pass to run ratio in game neutral environments, as well as their pace of play in game neutral environments. This is a team that wants to throw the ball and throw the ball quickly. They're trying to get off as many plays per game as possible, which is the best situation you could ever imagine in fantasy football. Not only is he playing in this offense, but both Amari Cooper and Cedric Wilson are gone. That's going to open up over 160 targets and almost 1,500 receiving yards in this offense. And if we add on the fact that Michael Gallup, oh dear God, this is the injury you should be worried about. I know everybody wants to yell at me for drafting Chris Godwin every chance I get at the 5-6 turn, taking Godwin everywhere. Do you not know Michael Gallup tore his ACL, tore his knee up after Chris Godwin did? His injury was after Chris Godwin. Gallup will miss the beginning portion of the season. So here, Dalton Schultz is going to have a massive role as the second option in the receiving game and one of the NFL's best offenses. Now, I don't necessarily think he's the same elite level talent as these other guys. I don't think you can say he's a Darren Waller. I don't think you can say he's a Kittle. Literally, I am ranking him here just because I don't think he's the same talent level as those players. If you're looking at a yards per route run, he was at 1.7 this past year. If you're looking at his air yards per game, he was sitting there at 40. The situation is better, but I can't have Dalton Schultz any higher than this. And we're actually going to be a little bit higher on our next tight end than the overall market. Let's go over to TJ Hockenson. With Hockenson, we're going to have him in the same tier as Dalton Schultz, despite the fact that if you go to Underdog right now, Dalton Schultz goes like 20 picks ahead of TJ Hockenson at this point. And with Hockenson, the reason people are off of him is because he hasn't been efficient through the first 3 years of his NFL career. You've had TJ Hockenson averaging 1.5 yards per route run, which is not a good mark at all, but I want to come to his defense. TJ Hockenson's a player that was drafted in 2019. No, he's not Kyle Pitts. He's not the best tight end prospect of all time, but he was a very, very good tight end prospect. He was selected in the top 10 picks of the NFL draft. He goes to a team that has absolutely no weapons on it, so he is asked to play a very large role right away. I mean, he actually got to over a 20% team target share this past season. He actually has posted back-to-back tight end 6 seasons on a points per game basis in this Detroit Lions offense. I would say that this target share for 20% of TJ Hockenson, I don't necessarily think that's safe. I think that will probably come down with the addition of Jameson Williams as well as DJ Chark, which is why, hell, he's going into his prime now when you expect tight ends to break out, and we have him ranked at 7, even though he's finished back-to-back at 6. I would expect the target share to come down ever so slightly, but because this should be a better offense than it was last year, I'd say the efficiency maybe counteracts that, where I'm perfectly fine having Hockenson right next to Dalton Schultz. I would say Hockenson is a much more talented player, and if he was in Dallas, Hockenson would potentially be up there with Darren Waller and George Kittle in that tier. But now let's go down to our next tier. Let's look over to Dallas Goedert. Back-to-back top 10 finishes at the tight end position. He actually went out there and was a monster this past season, right next to George Kittle, ahead of Kelce, ahead of Mark Andrews in his yards per route run, 2.6 yards per route run. And now he finally projects to be the full-time every down player in the Philadelphia Eagles offense for an entire season. We've actually had a decent amount of games without Zac Ertz in this offense through the course of Dallas Goedert's NFL career. If we pull this up from Rotoviz, in games where Zac Ertz played with Dallas Goedert averages 35 receiving yards a game. No Zac Ertz, bump that up almost to 60. And you see the same thing with his fantasy points per game, about 8.5 fantasy points per game. And if you have no Zac Ertz in this offense, that gets bumped up to almost 12. It's a night and day difference with Dallas Goedert and the usage of Zac Ertz in terms of if Ertz is gone, Dallas Goedert is a focal point. If Zac Ertz is there, of course, Zac Ertz is a good tight end, has been over the past 3 to 4 years. You are going to expect less production overall for Dallas Goedert. Now, there are some red flags. I don't think that this is going to be a very productive passing offense overall. I think Jalen Hurts is going to cap the ceiling, especially when you add in A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown should be the best receiving option Dallas Goedert's ever seen in his entire life, if we're going to be honest. So I am worried about that. I'm worried about Devontae Smith also being a very capable wide receiver too. I'm worried about the passing volume. So despite these very bullish signs for Dallas Goedert, I am going to have him ranked the tier below Dalton Schultz and TJ Hockenson. We're going to have him at 8. And now our next player in the same tier is the exact opposite. You're going to be looking at Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox, I tweeted this out a while ago, but I'm looking at him saying, okay, I'm worried. This looks like Robert Tonyan, because if you look at Dawson Knox over the past 3 years, tight end 38, tight end 32, tight end 9. One of those things doesn't fit in. One of those things looks like an outlier. So we have to go figure out, oh, is Dawson Knox better? Let's look at his yards per route run, 1.3, 1.2, 1.3. Okay, no, it looks like he's a very bad tight end. Air yards per game, 32, 31, 34. Looks like he has the same role. Looks like he's probably not a very good tight end. The one thing that took a massive jump up is Dawson Knox this past season had almost a 13% touchdown rate. Now, I need to admit, he plays in Buffalo. If you were going to project a tight end to have a very high touchdown rate, higher than league average, it would be if you play in Green Bay. It would be if you play in Buffalo. It would be if you play in one of the best passing offenses in the NFL. So Dawson Knox should have a touchdown rate higher than league average, but these underlying metrics are worrying me when it comes to Dawson Knox and the actual talent that he is. So the situation's great when you have, according to our draft guide, Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders gone, which opens up 183 targets in this offense. I don't think you're going to have Gabriel Davis getting all of that. So the situation's perfect. I just don't think he's a great tight end. So we're going to have him behind Dallas Goedert, even though Goedert is in a much, much worse situation. Now let's go down to our next tier of guys. Let's go over to our tight end 10, Zac Ertz. Now with Zac Ertz, he's going to start off the year very hot. Okay, let's be honest. This is going to be someone that is playing in an offense with no DeAndre Hopkins. His target competition will be Hollywood Brown and Rondale Moore. Zac Ertz looked very good in Arizona last year. If you're looking at the games in Arizona, Zac Ertz was, oh, dear God, he was the tight end 10 in fantasy. If we go ahead and we look at games where he played with Kyler Murray, he got up to about 5 receptions a game. He got up to almost 8 targets a game with Kyler Murray this past season. He was going to start off very hot. If you play in a regular fantasy football league where you can make trades throughout the season, draft Zac Ertz, trade him after week 4 before DeAndre Hopkins comes back. Now, if you're watching me draft on Underdog Fantasy in a tournament style draft where we really need to prioritize production for weeks 15, 16, and 17, given Zac Ertz's age, given the fact that Hopkins will be back in, given the fact that I don't necessarily think that he's a very talented player, I'm probably not going to be drafting Zac Ertz, but in your regular fantasy football format, he's perfect at 10. Now, our next guy at 11 is going to be Pat Freimuth. with Freimuth, yes, he was a very strong rookie, and Eric Ebron's gone this upcoming season. I mean, if we go ahead and we look at our draft guide, pull up the splits with and without Eric Ebron this past year, you're looking at Pat Freimuth as a tight end that with Eric Ebron, he averaged about 4.5 targets a game, and he averaged about 7.5 fantasy points per game. Now, without Eric Ebron, almost 12 points per game. A night and day difference here for Pat Freimuth. Obviously, you won't have Ebron this upcoming season. Now, I will say I am slightly concerned that the touchdown rate's not sustainable. I mean, he had a touchdown rate close to 10%. You're playing in Pittsburgh. He had less than 30 air yards a game. He's not being used downfield. He had a 12.5% team target share. So even though you would assume, oh, hell, he had some success as a rookie tight end, we're betting on Kyle Pitts to be that elite level player, I can't say the same with Freimuth. And our last guy, Mike Gesicki, you are going to have some serious target competition coming over with Tyreek Hill. But I think Gesicki actually rebounds this upcoming season, going right back to what we were saying with touchdown rate being very volatile. His touchdown rate fell under 2% this past year in Miami. That's not necessarily going to be the case going forward. I think he's an elite level athlete. I think he should be stepping into his prime. I think he's in a very, very bad situation, which is going to depress his value ever so slightly. But I am fine having Gesicki here. I wasn't drafting him earlier this offseason, but a lot of people have moved up Cole Kmet, Irv Smith Jr., who will be our guys in that next tier, but we'll get to him in another video. I used to love those players and thought we were being aggressive when we were drafting them before their ADP, but they've flown up drafts while Mike Gesicki has slid a little bit, so I'm still going to prefer Gesicki. Now, real quick, if you have not done so, go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate all y'all. I really hope you have a great day, and I hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow or the live stream tonight.